Hi, I'm Antilles58, and this is my Donkey Kong Country 2 Any% submission for SGDQ 2019. I'm actually submitting two different Donkey Kong Country 2 runs. This one, along with my 102% PB, which was recorded on Twitch. So the preferred category I'd like to run at the marathon is actually 102, but since this run was done offline, I figured I would use it as a little bit more of a just example of how I can talk and explain the run, but also talk about this particular category, make more of a full submission video, that sort of thing. So I'm submitting this category to be able to offer either as a donation incentive for 102 or to be able to do a race if there's anybody else that submits this. But I am interested in playing this game, so thank you for taking the time to consider it. And with that, I've already missed a good chunk of the run here. The most notable thing you'll see here is that I'm going very quickly through some of these levels because the developers built warp barrels into each level of the game in the first two worlds. So that's how I'm kind of skipping so quickly through these, along with some not so intended warps called wrong warps. A little bit of a tight trick there called Luckjaw, which saves about 3 to 4 seconds jumping into that warp barrel. And so our second example rather of a wrong warp is coming up in this next stage, and I'll explain them in a little more detail later in the run. But as we go into this, drop the snake. Have to do a backup strat here, which actually is a little bit faster. So I should probably stop doing that as a backup. But I'll explain the technical details behind those wrong warps a little bit later in the run. That wrong warp is actually very difficult to do consistently. But here we are on Crow, the most random boss in the game. And this game is the source of a lot of World 1 resets, because this boss can drop real eggs or fake eggs, and sometimes you can just get stuck here for 20 plus seconds, which almost always leads to a reset. But I got lucky here and got 2 real eggs, which is what we call fakeless, and really good to go. So even though I am doing this audio after the fact, this recording after the fact, I actually can talk this well during runs as well. I'm able to do pretty good commentary during my playthroughs, so I would try to do a pretty good description of what I'm doing. So a little bit of hesitation there. I went for a trick called a 2-1 jump, which is a pretty tight frame window to get a quick extra height from a team jump, but didn't get that one. But we're going to see a different kind of team up trick here called a team throw double jump to get to this warp barrel a little bit early. By throwing your Kong partner at an enemy and pressing the jump button while they're on their way back, you can get a little bit of a boost, which is something we make a lot of use of throughout the run. But yeah, the rest of World 2 continues to have those built-in developer warps, so nothing too exciting here. Just trying to move through it as quickly as possible. Apologies for not speaking a little bit more clearly in the World 1 stuff. I was trying to do my intro to the video at the same time as doing commentary on the video, so it didn't quite work out. But yeah, World 2 is a really good time for donations. This category differs from 102%, which is the other run I mentioned I'm submitting, in that here we obviously just try to move through the game as quickly as possible. In 102, what we try to do is get every single bonus in the game and every single DK coin in the game, and actually adds several levels as well, because you go through the Lost World stages. So you see all the bonuses, and more notably in Worlds 1 and 2, you actually don't just take the warps and skip through the levels. You go through most of the stages. So as fun as it is to see these 2 worlds done in roughly 5 minutes, it's almost more fun to see them done fully by gathering all the bonuses as well and doing that in less than 20 minutes. But here we are in Cleaver, the second boss of the game, and this is a pretty challenging boss to do quickly, actually, and we're coming up here on a jump that I absolutely hate. Every single time I do this jump, it terrifies me. Bouncing off that guy, just not easy it's really easy to either mistime the jump and fall in the lava, or bounce too soon and miss the hook and fall in the lava, so that's almost always a reset. This trick is lava fly, which is a little more well known in GDQ circles. It's actually not that hard. I think the jump off of Cleaver is much harder than lava fly, but trying to bait him to charge at you to spawn the hooks and jumping across. And that's about it for Cleaver. Actually almost got hit right there, so that was pretty lucky. And I just barely missed a swag strat here, which he can do a little bit of swag and get Diddy flying in the air through this whole animation. Well, some of the few instances of swag in this game, but didn't get it there to show off. Lost 3 seconds to the missed 2-1 jump and that little bit of slop on Cleaver where I missed that hit and almost died myself. But now that we're through World 2, we're into pretty much playing the game for real now. So the most important thing in this game is just using the rolling mechanic. Rolling is faster than walking or running, and rolling through enemies is faster than that. So every chance you get, you want to roll. Rambi can charge pretty well and do some jumps, so we use his charge every chance we get when we have Rambi. These jumps look pretty challenging, but they're actually really straightforward. Then I'm going to bail on Rambi right before going through that sign, because there actually is a slight pause in the game's animation when you dismount an animal buddy by going through a sign. That team throw right there into a barrel might have looked slower, and it is slower, but it's useful in that it sets up a super jump right here. So by taking this damage boost, I'm able to get really high off the screen, and that allows me to use Dixie's hover to get all the way across that pit without taking the barrel. This saves about 10 seconds. And with that, we're through the first real stage of the speedrun. And we're into Glimmers Galleon, which is one of the most difficult stages in the game to optimize. What you want to look for in this stage is every time I go around a corner, how closely am I cutting the corner, or am I bonking into the wall? If I bonk into a wall, it means I've lost a little bit of time. If I take the corner really tightly and at a pretty tight angle, like that one was kind of slow, but that one was pretty fast. That one was good too. There's a couple spots here where you have to go over an enemy. Like there I went a little too high and got stuck in the wall, or in the alcove up there. But then corners like this one are where you go really close is what you're looking for on this stage. This stage may not really seem like one where you're going to lose or gain a lot of time, but it actually is one of the most difficult to do quickly in the entire run. Right there I lost a little bit of time because I didn't have optimal momentum. But right there I went over another enemy and went pretty smoothly. And that right there was pretty smooth, skipping 3 corners that if you do that wrong, you can end up bonking on all 3, and it can be kind of a nightmare. So here I'm going to switch to Diddy while I wait for that to go past, because the animation of that spine keeps going, so I don't lose any time to switch to Diddy there. And now we move into Crochead, which is notoriously one of the more difficult stages in the game, but in the last year and a half, and actually since this was last shown at a GDQ, there is a new wrong warp in this stage, and it's a really, really weird wrong warp that I understand how some of the other ones work, but this one, I actually have no idea technically what's behind it. In general, what a wrong warp is the game doesn't know where to send you when you glitch it, so it sends you out of the level and marks it complete. But somehow for this one, an interaction between that cutlass and this barrel leads you to just leave the stage. So that saves about 20 plus seconds, and is indeed new since the last GDQ. So if you do choose to include the any % run into this marathon, you'll see that wrong warp, which is a brand new thing. Now we're on to Ratley, and Ratley is a pretty cool animal buddy. He doesn't move very well horizontally though, so it's interesting that they have this animal buddy with great vertical movement and they give him a horizontal stage, one of the longest horizontal stages in the whole game. So what I'm trying to do with Ratley is stay in the air as much as possible. So I'm buffering jumps every time I get close to landing. I tap B right before that to get this jump, and just keep moving and holding right as much as possible. He just bounces really slowly along the ground, but when you get these good full jumps, you get a lot of speed. Little boost off that barrel there, bounce off those guys. Had a pretty smooth rattle battle going here. yeah, we're going to do something at this goal too that you've probably seen me do already, but by pressing select on the goal, we switch Kong members and trigger the goal at the same time, and if certain conditions are true, that'll happen. Now, an important thing, we're going to switch underwater here to Diddy, and we're going to take a damage boost. Somehow switching underwater causes this glitch to happen. And it thinks you're in water physics, but you're not, so it launches you up. And then I try to set up the positions of these enemies right here to do another wrong warp. This is a more typical wrong warp where you get an invisible object. In this case, we clash those beetles together, and when you throw the invisible object, it messes with the IDs of the items around you. In that case, it messed with the ID of the warp barrel or the bonus barrel, which meant that it didn't think the bonus barrel existed. So when I went into the bonus barrel, it thought that it didn't have anywhere to send me, so it just sent me out of the level, marked it complete, and called it good. So Bramble Blast here, the only thing we can really do to speed up this first section is to try to get the quick shots out of those barrels that are pointing the direction that you want to go. So I missed 2 of them. It happens. Got most of them though, so that's good. There's a damage boost here that serves 2 purposes. First is it gets Diddy in front. Second, it lets you use iframes to skip through that B and move through that section a little faster. But the reason we want Diddy in front is because we're setting up a trip called Vine Clip, where we use another one of those team throw double jumps to get right up against the edge of that vine and throw over the top. With that, we move on to the boss of World 3, Cudgel. So Cudgel is a pretty straightforward boss. He tries to land on you. You jump around. And you grab these barrels. And what I do here is each one of the hits has a certain count before he falls from the ceiling. So as long as I position myself to where I grab the barrel right when it falls, I do a count. So here I'm going to count to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Move forward and throw back, and that hits him at the earliest possible moment with that TNT barrel. What I look for that count is Dixie's breathing, basically. So here, 1, 2, back, good. Got the hit. Now, if you're off on the timing a little bit on these phases, worst situation would be you get hit, and each one of these, well, you lose Dixie, you're in trouble, but here's 3. But if you don't get hit, you can, and you miss the throw or something like that, or you're positioned wrong and he knocks the TNT barrel away, then you lose at least 10 seconds. So all of us who do this boss just have the fight memorized to know exactly what to do. It's one of the more, well, every boss fight in this game is pretty scripted with the exception of Crow's RNG, but this one's just about paying attention. As long as you pay attention, you'll be fine. So really nice World 3 here, actually. A couple little hiccups in the first 2 stages, but everything else went really well. And actually the reason that these are gold for me is I retired from the speedrunning for a really long time. Over a year. It was almost 2 years for this game specifically. In fact, this PB that I'm speaking over right now is my first PB in this game in over 2 years. So the time that I'm saving is entirely because these 2 wrong warps that I'm showing off, the Crochead one that I showed earlier and then one later in the game, were discovered after I stopped playing. So just the new wrong warps alone, plus my old movement, were enough to get me a new PB, even without a ton of D-rust. So if I'm able to put in a lot of practice into this over the next several months as we get ready for GDQ, it'll be pretty good. But anyway, this trick right here is something called Scrolly Scroll, and by ending up with the spider, the hook, and a web all at the same time, I'm able to somehow freak out the camera and cause it to send you gliding across the honey. So we call it Scrolly Scroll. Some people like to call it Honey Slide, but I don't like to call it that. I like to call it Scrolly Scroll. So other than that, just moving through the level. A little bit of a hiccup there on that honey. Honey jumping is actually an extremely difficult mechanic. And with that, we go into our first auto-scroller of the game, Target Terror. So there's 3 auto-scrollers in this game. all of which are really, really good time for donations, and they kind of occur at the middle of the run, so it's a really good marathon run from that perspective. But there's not a lot you can really do in the stage to speed things up. Some of the other What's interesting actually is that every single one of the auto scrollers has slightly different mechanics as to how you can go more quickly and save frames. This one you can save frames by jumping at just the right time to cross those gaps, because when you're on the cart you don't have a lot of control over what you're doing, but once you get off the cart you do have control over your movement. So if you jump soon enough or jump over those dragonflies, mosquitoes we call them, you can save some time. So you want to really try to get optimal jumps as you transition from cart to cart. I don't think mine are terribly great in this particular run, but getting better. The other big challenge that I have is that since I play 102 as well, levels like this where the bonuses in an auto scroller, I'm so used to going for them in a completion category that I have to really pay attention to make sure I don't accidentally go into the bonuses in any percent. There's a one-up balloon up there called Swag Balloon, which is pretty well known, but I don't get it anymore. It can lose 3 seconds if you mess it up, and I just don't want to try for that anymore. So right here is another wrong warp that is a little more of one of the traditional wrong warps. The way you get the invisible object is a little different than before, where we clash 2 beetles together. Instead, for this one, we're going to clash that beetle against the brambles. Invisible object, just like before, throw it here, like that. There's actually about a 4-frame window to get that clash, to get the invisible object, and it makes me nervous every single time, but I'm actually really, really consistent at that wrong warp. Even though I took a year and a half off from speedrunning, I still get that wrong warp almost every time because I drilled it so much that it's basically automatic for me. But that doesn't stop me from feeling nervous every single time. So here, it may be a little bit hard to tell, but the movement is actually pretty different. Instead of jumping off of the cart, I'm jumping with the cart. So you can't really do much for the speed other than controlling where you jump. Jumping down big slopes like that actually saves frames. So here I'm jumping over those slopes too, but it doesn't do much. So you just kind of go through this level and hope you don't die. Actually, sometimes if you're not paying attention, you still can die here. I had 2 runs that were pretty promising over the last week or 2 as I was working to get this video ready to go, and both of them died in Rickety Race, and that was pretty disappointing because I'll go dozens and dozens to hundreds of runs without dying here, and then of course you're 20 seconds ahead with a brand new wrong warp and dead. But that didn't happen this time, so run continued. Switching to Diddy. We're moving on to Mudhole Marsh. Arguably the hardest stage in the game. I'd put it at 3rd hardest myself. Lots of tight rolls. Probably the most difficult pure platforming stage in the game in terms of rolling and jumping. Scary little roll under that barrel there. But like I said earlier, you want to be rolling as much as you possibly can, especially rolling through enemies. This part's a little bit scary, and really unfortunate death. I was really pretty upset when that one happened, because it was a really solid run up to that point. Even the rest of this World 4 had been pretty good, but what happened at that last moment a little bit too soon. And the funny thing about it is I was already past the hard part. The hardest part of this stage is actually what we're coming up on right here. This area right here. You can roll across some of those gaps. I almost messed that up again, but right there, that jump's the scary one. So I kind of got ahead of my too soon there, which is too bad because that ended up losing me almost 30 seconds just from that death right there. We'll see it when I finish this world exactly how far behind I am, but 20 to 30 seconds lost from that, which is really sad. But anyway, this has another go. Wrong warp. The movement there is really precise. Like, you have to make sure that the right objects are on the screen for every step of the wrong warp. But we did it. A little bit of hesitation there because my position wasn't quite right. As I mentioned, honey jumping is difficult. Here's another team throw, double jump. Lets us skip a large portion of this level. A little bit more trouble with the honey. And sometimes when you do team throws, you get an extra super jump stored, so that's how I was able to make it up there pretty quickly. And we get to see a little bit more of Ramby and his charge abilities here. As with earlier, this part looks impressive, it looks really fast, but there's nothing very difficult about it. Got hung up on the ledge there a little bit, which was a little bit scary, especially after that metal death. I was feeling kind of nervous at this point. Something right there to skip the barrel called a Ramby double jump. It's also much more prominent in the 102% run, but there we used just to skip the barrel and save a little bit of time. King Zing Sting, pretty straightforward fight as long as you know where to position Squawks. His movement pattern is very consistent. Try to set him up to be able to hit him really quickly, which I miss right here and have to adjust. Fortunately, it didn't cost me too much, a couple seconds lost. But now I have to kind of play it by ear as the movement is off, and I almost got hit right there. But I got that one. It was a good hit. And yeah, that's World 4. World 5 doesn't really have any crazy tricks or glitches, it's just pure execution pretty much the whole way through. But it's also easily the most fun world in the game. A lot of technical movement. Normally I wouldn't grab the mid-barrel there for safety, but since, like I mentioned, I should have 2 free wrong warps, that giving me free time, it doesn't really hurt to use that there. Because even if I die, the next wrong warp will still more than save me enough time. Which is kind of why this would make a cool GDQ run, is that with 2 new wrong warps to save a lot of time, it will look a little bit different than any previous entry. Whether it's a race, a solo run, or otherwise. And here, with that, we're coming up on our 3rd and final auto-scroller, Haunted Hall. So as I mentioned in the last auto-scroller, the carts here, if you notice the movement is the same, you do jump with the cart this time. But here, when you jump up some slopes, you actually save some frames too. Same with jumping through these doors. So I try to hit the doors at the highest point. I jump up every slope I can, and I jump down the big slopes. So here's some jumps. You'll see me jump here. The gimmick, of course, is that you need to grab those plus barrels to increase your timer. And if you hit the minus barrels, you will lose time. And if your time gets 0, our good friend Tupac there will snag you. We affectionately call this stage Tupac's Library. There he is again. Yeah, another really good time for donations. But I don't have any donations to read, so I'll just keep talking about stuff. 102 would go down underneath there to a bonus. Here we have to try to jump over some bees, which, again, when you switch between the categories in this game, it's really important to remember not to take bonuses, or if you're playing 102, to take the bonuses. So it's gotta pay attention even in the auto scrollers. But either way, it's been a long time since the main categories of this game were shown off. It's been over a year and a half, I think, since this game was in GDQ, and then even longer. I think the relay was the last time that any percent was shown, and we've had 2 new wrong warps since then. And then 102 has been even longer than that, and there's quite a few improvements to that category as well. So either way, there's a lot of good new stuff to show off, and it's just a fun, classic game. These pillars are always a little bit scary, as a tiny mistake in the movement will get you dead. But the rest of this stage goes really smoothly. The wind patterns here are not random, they are position based as to when they switch. These hooks, actually, the wind starts moving to the right before the visual of the wind does, so you can jump sooner than you might think. Team throw here, so that I can set up the goal swap at the end of the stage. I mentioned earlier that only in certain conditions can you swap Kongs and hit the target at the same time. Something called an airborne state, which you set up on Dixie by throwing her into that barrel. And with this we move on to Parachute Panic, one of the most impressive and well-known stages in the speedrun. Doing this one quickly never ceases to impress, so it's a major crowd pleaser, and it's also super fun to do. And I had a pretty good Parachute Panic in this run. The goal with this is every time you hover, you want to press Y for as little time as possible. So you just want to tap it really quick to get the hover, just to barely get around those bees. This section is really interesting. There's actually like 4 or 5 different ways to do it. I chose one of the easier ones here because I was trying to lock in my time save, but there is a more impressive one that can save a few seconds, and that is definitely something I'll work on. But right there I missed what's called the Diddy headbutt, which seems to be kind of random as to whether you hit it or not, but unfortunately I had to grab this parrot and take him around those bees, and it's really scary when that happens. Missing the headbutt's pretty common. Kind of showing what happens there. Now we're on to Webb Woods, and this is the most difficult stage in the game, for sure. Super technical, really easy to die. You're just using the spider, going over a bunch of open pits, any of which you could fall into and just get dead super fast. So lots going on. So the most important thing to know about this is those platforms. You can make instant platforms with your webs by pressing L and R at the same time. The game developers intended for you to press L, R, or A to make the webs, and then you press it once to trigger the web, and then you press it again to harden the web, but they made it such that if you, probably on accident, but if you make those at the same time, you push those buttons at the same time, you can make the platform instantly. So if you do that right at the peak of your jump, you can actually jump and land almost immediately. We're coming up on the hardest part of the stage here, called the Eagle Pit. And unfortunately, my platform there spawned a little bit early, but I was still able to move forward and recover. That's a second faster if my platform had spawned when it was supposed to, but the rest of this is just using damage boosts and instant platforms to move through quickly. So that was actually a fairly decent Webb Woods, all things considered. 102 makes this already extremely difficult stage even more difficult, because I don't know if you saw it, but that DK coin flickered away really quickly. So at the end of a very difficult stage, you have a very precise timing trick to snag the DK coin, and if you miss it, you have to do the most difficult stage in the game again. So here's Crow 2. Just like the earlier Crow, this one is random as well. And the randomness here is where the barrel will spawn. It can spawn in any of the 3 locations, on the far left, far right, or in the middle. You want it to spawn close to you, so you can just grab it and throw it, which I got the best RNG right there. But unfortunately, I thought I was grabbing the rope, and I missed. So the reason that happened is because I'm trying to jump off right away, and then I get hit, which loses even more time, because as Dixie, I don't trust the movement. Like, there's very consistent movement I can do here to speed this up as Diddy, but Dixie's movement is a little bit different, so I had to adjust and use her and keep her alive. But between getting hit with Dixie and failing to grab the rope and jump off of it immediately earlier, I'd lost most of that 15 seconds lost was actually from the crow fight, and a little bit from the missed headbutt in Parachute Panic. So now we're on to Arctic Abyss, which is one of the most horrible stages in the entire game, because this fish right here is the worst character in the game. I don't care how cute his face looks. He is terrible. He bonks walls, just like in Glimmers. You don't want to bonk because that loses time. So again, swimming levels, you want to take those corners as precisely as possible. But he just gets hit all the time. Like, you think that you're going to take out an enemy with his charge, but instead he gets hit. It's just super dumb. And the number of runs that have died to the fish just getting hit in bad ways is very, very high. He's bad in all 3 Donkey Kong Country games, but in this one he's the worst. But what's cool is if you charge right as the water's pulling you down, you can get this drop through the water charge and go really fast. We'll switch to Diddy here to set up a trick in this next stage called Diddy Windy, in which you can team throw off the top of the screen and do some off-screen movement. It's really cool, but unfortunately for you guys, I didn't get a high enough jump, so you don't get to see it in this video. But it saves 2 to 3 seconds if you do it. I lost probably, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds by missing it, but it's a really neat trick, and it is pretty consistent, so I just unfortunately missed it that time. But the off-screen movement there is something that also has never been shown in a GDQ before. Maybe it was. Maybe it was shown in Warpless. I can't remember. But that's another cool thing that wasn't here today, but would be in the marathon. And it is used in both 102 and in any percent. So team throw off the top of the screen and move around. Pretty cool. So unfortunately I spawned the hooks there when I wasn't planning on it, so I lost a little bit of time but stayed alive. So overall we lose 5 to 10 seconds in this windy well, which seems like it would be pretty bad, but the stage after this has undergone significant changes in the last year. And that's what makes this run a really interesting candidate for another GDQ appearance. What's interesting about the wind mechanics is you actually can control your movement by holding up or down, so it is possible to speed up and slow down a little bit. And to maneuver around the enemies, you have to know whether you should be holding up, down, neutral, or otherwise. But Castle Crush is also one of the more famous levels in the speedrun, in that there's that famous trick where you can summon the goal to yourself using an invisible barrel, which turns this 4.5 minute auto-scroller into about a 1.5 minute auto-scroller. But recently, it was discovered you could use this invisible barrel to move this cutlass, causing him to swing when you jump into the Ramby barrel, and triggering the exact same glitch that we saw in Crackhead earlier. Again, I have no idea how the cutlass causes that to happen, but we take now that 4.5 minute auto-scroller and with the wrong warp turn it into a 30-second auto-scroller. So that wrong warp right there saves over a minute. And this run right here is going to be the first run I complete in which I get both of the new wrong warps. So even though I have a bunch of really bad stuff happen in this run, like that death in Mudhole, the really sloppy crow fight, the missed Diddy Windy, what else did I have? The missed headbutt and Parachute Panic. And then whatever is about to happen right here, I don't know how this happened. I didn't slide under that bee. You're supposed to slide, and then I got hit. And now I can't do a really important trick that lets you roll through the end of the stage with Diddy. There's a trick called Throw Your Girlfriend, where you throw Dixie, get an invincibility barrel, and then you can just like roll through all this. I almost didn't make it into the bees there. That would have ruined everything, because I would have died and it would have ruined the PB, but I made it. But I call this Girlfriend's Revenge, because Diddy did not make it and Dixie finished the stage. But I lost about 20 seconds there from that. So with those 3 major things happening, I lost 20 to 30 seconds in 3 different worlds. Like, I'm still losing time because I had to adjust to getting back into Diddy here. So by losing time in 3 different worlds, I lost almost a minute in this run, and these new rung warps are so big that they still allow me to get a PB. Last rung warp of the game right here. There I got the invisible object by actually breaking open the clobber and grabbing the clobber and the barrel, or the cannonball at the same time. So this stage is Rattly, where we finally get to use his vertical movement, and we use something called Rattly double jumps here, which are pretty precise. You move them by, this one here is called an Omega double jump. You do that by pressing A and B at the same time in a 3-frame window. These other short hop double jumps are used by buffering an A input and B, but I kept missing the double jump here. Finally get it on this one, I think. Get up to this barrel. What's funny is that other double jump is pretty easy, and this one's harder, and I nail this one first try. That one scares me every time because it looks like you're going to hit the B. But then the squawk section here looks easier than the Rattly section, but it is also very difficult to optimize. Once again, as with the swimming, you want to take every corner as perfectly as possible, and I don't do that each time. Any PB, you're getting pretty nervous at this point. Even though I'm 20 seconds behind, I know I have that minute or so in the bag. So and I know that I also can't afford to make any real mistakes because of all the way that what's it called, Clapper's Cavern went so badly with the Dixie ending. So you see, I'm already starting to lose time against my gold segment, which did include this wrong warp. But at this point, I knew that I was going to be ahead after this world, because Stronghold Showdown here, where you see Donkey for a little bit of a tease, is a very quick stage, so I knew I'd be ahead, but I should have been over a minute ahead, or saved a minute, but I only ended up saving about 37 seconds there, so that tells me I lost 30 seconds in World 6. So 25 seconds in World 4, 15 seconds in World 5, 30 seconds in World 6. Lots of unfortunate stuff. But Screech's sprint here, last stage of the game, is actually a pretty fun stage to do. The beginning movement is really fun. The rolls here are pretty tight. I actually should not grab the mid barrel here, because if I die, I'm not going to PB anyway, so I might as well have saved the second, but I didn't. Skip the race by going over the top, and I actually skipped a barrel right there, which is a pretty tight window to do, but it saves half a second. And then the rest of the stage is just moving as quickly as you can with squawks through the stage. The unfortunate thing about skipping the race is we don't get the really cool music, but B-ring skip right here. Shoutouts to Canis for making a really great tutorial and showing how to do that. Shoutouts to everyone in the Donkey community, honestly. They've been I've just really appreciated how they've all welcomed me back into things after being gone for so long. So if any of you are for any reason watching this at this point, you guys are awesome. I really appreciated the welcome being back. And this final boss is, I think Twig put it best at SGDQ 2014. It's basically a glorified cutscene. There's nothing much you can do other than just try to throw as quickly as possible, to the point where you even anticipate when he's going to start sucking up the cannonballs. But as I was saying, yeah, massive thank you to the Donkey Kong Country community. I retired from speedrunning for, I don't know, a year and a half or so, and honestly, I thought I was done. I didn't think I would ever come back to this. I have 5 kids, a full-time job, a bunch of stuff that I just have to deal with, so I didn't think I could keep up speedrunning as a hobby anymore. It just takes so much work, and I was really sad to see my GDQ dream kind of die, because I never did have the chance to run in it. I mean, I've had some awesome GDQ moments, whether it's helping organize the relay or commentary for Void's first run of 102%, donation reading, all that stuff. Like, I've had great GDQ moments, but I never did get that chance to actually play in a marathon. But seeing now that we've got these 2 new wrong warps, that I'm able to basically come back from not playing at all to completely de-rusted in less than 2 months, tells me that, you know, I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. The skills are coming back super quickly, and with another couple months of derust, I'll be as good as I've ever been. I'm already as good as I've ever been, but only getting better from here. Another easy minute to save in this run will put me back in the top 25 on any percent, and I'm not that far away from getting back into the top 5 or 6 in 102. Even though there's been a ton of progress and discoveries in the 1.5 to 2 years since I did retire, but honestly, just having this opportunity again means a lot to me. I didn't think I'd be doing it, but here we are, finishing up another PB against K. Rool. Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little disappointed that this was only 16 seconds, but it is cool to see how much time those new tricks do save. Kind of a slow throw there. There's a cool trick there too, that if I had gotten hit by the blue clouds, there's a blue Diddy is a famous trick in this as well, which I would probably do in any marathon setting. But when it's a PB on the line, that trick actually loses 7 seconds, so it's not something I'd want to do. Dodge the purple gas clouds, and with that, just run to the left. Diddy's fast enough to avoid the suction by just holding Y and left. Dixie, however, is not fast enough, so if for some reason you got hit in the final phase, you're going to need to do a little bit of different movement with Dixie, which can add a little bit of drama to the fight. That was a pretty solid throw. And with that, my first PB in any percent in over 2 years. Saved 16 seconds. And Donkey knocks K. Rool away. And we move on to the ending and the credits. Well, not the credits so much as Cranky and his stuff. But yeah, that's my any percent run. It's a run that I'm definitely looking to improve in the next couple weeks. I'd like to get that to a mid 40 sort of time. Like I said, I've got about a minute to save of just between the one death and then the few sloppy moments. Could have saved quite a bit of time in this, but even that aside, still ends up being a pretty solid run. Everything else is pretty good, and other than the wrong warps, which are fun to show off, everything's pretty safe to do as well. So I feel pretty comfortable with the 45-minute estimate on this run, and I'm also pretty comfortable with a 138 estimate on 102. On the event that you're still watching, I know you have a lot of submission videos to watch, so I don't know if you're watching this or not, but I appreciate your consideration very much. It's been a long road to get back to this point, and just to be considered again for a GDQ, and for what I think is a pretty good window. I think this would be a great time to show this game again. I love that I'm available for it again. Didn't think that was going to happen. But as I mentioned before, 102% would be my preferred run of the two. I know it's a little bit longer, takes a little bit more time, but I think it shows off a lot more of the game, has a lot more cool movement. I think the biggest difference between the two is that while any percent here has a lot more really precise tricks, like some of those wrong warps are really tight to execute and get perfect. 102 is much more movement intensive. As not to minimize the movement in this category, there's a ton of movement that is pretty difficult, but 102 includes the bonuses, includes a lot more stages, and just does a lot more stuff. So definitely go check out that video as well. And another cool thing is with the two new wrong warps, you see there my old run had a 42%, this one has 40%, so 2 fewer stages completed. Alright, thanks for watching.